still really only one story in town, although developments, of course, continue apace. Rioters now being warned that they could face terrorism charges and also that they can expect rapid sentencing, something that a character called Dylan Carey already knows about. He pleaded guilty yesterday at Liverpool Crown Court to violent disorder. At Liverpool Magistrates Court heard that a hostile crowd of around 200 people had formed in the area and began throwing items towards the mosque. They also chanted, "Who the bleep is Allah?" and shouted at police officers, "Why are you protecting them?" So, I mean, that immediately throws up a couple of questions, doesn't it, for people caught up in that kind of violence. Where did they get the idea that the killer of the 3 little girls in Southport was a Muslim? Why would they otherwise bring Allah into it? And where on earth did they get the incredibly toxic and dangerous notion that the police were somehow complicit in keeping information from the public?
Well, it's pretty horrendous. The 3rd young girl has died as a result of the stabbings yesterday in Southport. I obviously join everybody in my horror at what has happened. I know the Prime Minister went to lay flowers and was heckled, and it shows you how unhappy the public are with the state of law and order in our country. I have to say there are 1 or 2 questions. Was this guy being monitored by the security services? Some reports say he was, others less sure. The police say it's a non-terror incident, just as they said the stabbing of an Army Lieutenant Colonel in uniform on the streets of Kent the other day was a non-terror incident. I just wonder whether the truth is being withheld from us. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it is a fair and legitimate question. What I do know is something is going horribly wrong in our once beautiful country.
Well, that's one question answered. That is precisely where they got the idea that the police were keeping information from them. Call it a coincidence if you prefer. But guess which political party Dylan Carey was out canvassing for last month in Makerfield, up in the northwest? Go on, have a guess. I'm not going to give any prizes for this one. Yeah, you got it. At Nigel's latest publicity vehicle, the Reform UK Limited Party, a party which, of course, 20% of its current MPs have served time in jail for attacking British women. But, of course, the riots have absolutely nothing to do with the man that told people like Dylan Carey that the police officers were possibly, or the police were possibly keeping information from them, and indeed that the killer was a Muslim. Nothing to do with Nigel.
At no point in the last week or in the previous 30 years have I ever encouraged the use of violence, have I ever encouraged the use of anti-democratic means. And yet, you get the internet and people saying things on the internet. We have senior Labour politicians like Annie MacDonald saying, I wanted the riots to happen. Mm-hmm. We have former Conservative MPs like Anna Soubry saying that I orchestrated the riots. Mm-hmm. We have LBC presenters like James O'Brien calling them the Farage riots. I have had nothing to do with any form of street violence now or at any point in my career.
Did I call them the Farage riots? I'm so sorry. I should have said Farage. The Farage riots. I apologise to everybody concerned for that little slip of the tongue. What did he say about violence? I didn't quite catch it.
If this is not delivered, there will be widespread public anger in this country. Yes. On a scale and in a way that we have never seen before. If that happens, much as I'm enjoying myself, I love doing the LBC talk show 4 nights a week. I love doing it. Please stay. Those of you really engaged, it's a great fun thing to do. I enjoy my trips to the States with Trump in the White House and everything else. I've been enjoying my life. But if they don't deliver this Brexit that I spent 25 years of my life working for, then I will be forced to don khaki, pick up a rifle and head for the front line.
Gosh. And of course, one is left with the other question of where the idea to target these hotels came from, why the idea to target hotels containing completely innocent human beings, children included, of course, some of whom witnessed rioters drawing their fingers across their throat in a throat-cutting gesture while they were cowering in buildings that were already on fire. Where on earth would the people currently being convicted of rioting got the idea that targeting these hotels would be a good plan.
We've no idea who some of these people are. We've no idea whether some of these might be ISIS.
That was Farage himself, filming himself in 2020 at a hotel where asylum seekers were being accommodated. I mean, you know, it's a wonderful rhetorical tactic, isn't it? I've no idea whether that man over there might be a paedophile. I'm just asking questions. I've no idea whether that woman over there might be a terrorist. I'm just asking questions. But the kind of people setting fire to bins and hotels and attacking police officers receive a very different message, don't they, from that kind of rhetoric. Well, at least I kind of think they do. So he's very unhappy about these riots being called the Farage riots. The explanation of why he posted that original clip suggesting that the authorities were keeping information from the police, and indeed that the police were keeping information from the people, and indeed that the culprit had been on intelligence watch lists, or indeed had been a Muslim. That was extraordinary. I should probably play you that bit as well. Who do you think his source was? Where would you turn to for your information? Where would you turn to for your reliable information on what was going on in Britain? Would you turn to me for the facts? Would you turn to the BBC? Perhaps GBB's is your preferred broadcast outlet, but you know, you'd probably want to double check or triple check, wouldn't you, the provenance of these claims. So you've seen on social media, or you've come across the claim somewhere that the police are deliberately keeping information from, and that is the single reason why, the single greatest reason why police officers, some of whom will be listening to this program, some of whom their wives, their husbands, their partners, their children will be listening to this program. Police officers coming under sustained and vicious attack from members of the public who believe the lie that the police were somehow complicit in keeping information from the public, a lie that you just heard issued from Nigel Farage's own nicotine-stained lips, albeit with the constant caveat, I don't know, I'm just asking questions. I don't know whether he's feigning ignorance of British law or whether he is genuinely ignorant of British law, but the police can't decide to release any names at all, especially when they're under 18. That decision has to be taken by a High Court judge. But why let the facts stand in the way of an opportunity to inflame the sort of violent thugs that have been terrorising completely innocent and law-abiding citizens up and down our country for the last week? Why let the facts stand in the way of the feelings? But where do you think he was getting his information from? This sitting member of Parliament, this elected MP, where do you think this broadcaster, this self-styled journalist, where do you think he was getting his information from? Where do you think he turns to when he wants to get a really clear steer on what's actually going on in Britain? It wouldn't be an alleged human trafficker and organised criminal based in Romania, surely. It just wouldn't be, would it? There's no earthly way anybody would claim that they only put this poison into public discourse because they believed what they read on the social media feed of a Romania-based alleged human trafficker and organised criminal. Not even Nigel Farage would stoop that low, surely, to try to exonerate his own culpability in this crisis by claiming that he had acted in an entirely honourable fashion by taking the words of an alleged human trafficker and organised criminal as potential gospel.
This is the problem, isn't it? One of the reasons the Southport riots were as bad as they were is we weren't told the truth. There were stories online from some very prominent folks with big followings, Andrew Tate, etc.
Whoa, what? Andrew Tate? Literally the alleged human trafficker and organised criminal. So here we have a British MP claiming that his decision to inject poison into the bloodstream of the British public, encouraging people like the young man in Liverpool who has just pleaded guilty to violent disorder, but who in April, of course, was canvassing for Nigel Farage's political party, encouraging them to join public violence where the police are being accused of keeping information from the public. Nigel Farage's source for this was Andrew Tate's social media account? But he's absolutely adamant that the riots had nothing to do with him?
At no point in the last week or in the previous 30 years have I ever encouraged the use of violence, have I ever encouraged the use of anti-democratic means. And yet, you get the internet and people saying things on the internet. We have senior Labour politicians like Annie MacDonald saying, I wanted the riots to happen. Mm-hmm. We have former Conservative MPs like Anna Soubry saying that I orchestrated the riots. Mm-hmm. We have LBC presenters like James O'Brien calling them the Farage riots. I have had nothing to do with any form of street violence now or at any point in my career.
And yet all of the people engaging in the street violence believed what Nigel Farage told them might be true just 1 week ago. So, hey, I am a little bit guilty sometimes of cognitive bias. Is it fair to call these pogroms, these riots, after the man, the most prominent disseminator of the lies which many of the rioters apparently believed? Is it fair to call them the Farage or Farage riots? If not, why not? I think there's a fairly good case there of why it's a perfectly reasonable sobriquet, but Nigel's very upset, recording more little films of himself, casting himself as the real victim. 3 dead girls, of course, in Southport. Police under constant attack from mindless thuggery. You've got hotels being set on fire. You've got shops being looted. You've got businesses being destroyed. But I think we should all take a moment now to feel sorriest for Nigel Farage, the real victim of the 2024 riots up and down this country, is clearly the man who told the rioters that the police were keeping information from them. And where did he get his information from? An alleged human trafficker and organised criminal. But hey-ho, he doesn't like the title Farage Riots.
Last year, over 45,000 people made the unsafe, unnecessary and illegal journey across the Channel. Our asylum system has been overwhelmed. We're now spending almost £7 million a day on hotels. Stopping the boats is one of the 5 promises the Prime Minister has made to the British people, and it's my top priority. That's why today I'm announcing a new illegal migration bill to do exactly that. The Prime Minister and I have been working flat out for months to bring this legislation to Parliament. This bill will mean that if you come here illegally, you will not be able to stay. You will be detained and removed to your home country if safe, or a safe third country like Rwanda. We are committed to helping those in need, like the hundreds of thousands of people we have supported from Ukraine, Afghanistan and Hong Kong in recent years. But it's not fair that people who travel through a string of safe countries and then come to the UK illegally can jump the queue and game our system. This bill will bring an end to that. Enough is enough. We must stop the boats.
Fired up, Suella Braverman has launched a broadside against both Gary Lineker and Elton John, labelling the pair out of touch, virtue signalling elites. The Home Secretary argued that pampered multimillionaires should not be lecturing the public on immigration policy from their villas and private jets. Elton John, who spent the summer kicking back in Saint-Tropez, had warned Braverman's rhetoric risked legitimising hate and violence, whilst Lineker said that she couldn't possibly know asylum seekers claiming to be gay were lying, after she accused some migrants of pretending to be homosexual to game the system. In what's been seen as a bid for the Tory leadership, the Home Secretary has recently ramped up her anti-migration rhetoric, branding free movement an existential threat to the West and warning that multiculturalism had failed. I find this absolutely fascinating, that if you're going to pick a fight with anybody, don't do it with a couple of national treasures. Look, whatever you think of Gary Lineker, he is very popular for what he does, and he has taken in asylum seekers, whether you like him or not. It's a bold shout to pick a fight with him. And then Elton John, you know, again, he has campaigned for gay rights and a range of things against all odds, and he is arguably another national treasure. By the way, both of those individuals earn a lot of money and they pay a lot of tax. So regardless of whether Suella Braverman thinks they're out of touch or otherwise, I think she's picked the fight with the wrong people, because all of us, frankly, who sit around here are not necessarily qualified to talk about asylum seekers, but we can see that Suella Braverman's policies have not worked, that her rhetoric is divisive and nasty, and that if she really wants to solve the problem and to stop the boats and do all this stuff, and by the way, for anybody who's thinking of texting me and tweeting me and Xing me and all that stuff saying, James, you're not tough on immigration, we thought better of you and all that nonsense. I am tough on immigration. I do want to see the boat stopped and I want to make sure that the policies are sensible. But when you've got somebody spouting rhetoric on one hand and doing nothing on the other, and then just having a go at national treasures, Suella Braverman, back in your box, shut up.
You can't read the room properly because people like her, because she's passionate. I think so. Well, let's go back to the grassroots. I don't
care whether I like her or not.
No,
it's a
no,
question
but
of whether
what
she's
I'm trying
right.
to say is that she is at least she has a clear vision of what she wants to do. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but at least she is trying to sort migration out. She can see the 44,000 that came over illegally. Of course, there were 600 net migrants who came in legally last year. How are we going to pay for the schools, the hospitals, the infrastructure?
But here's the point, she's not doing anything.
She isn't doing anything apart from spouting extreme right-wing rhetoric in a bid for leadership that's divisive and nasty. Like James so rightly said, we don't often agree, but I have to agree with you on that one. She is divisive and she is nasty. And Suella, if you can't take the heat, if you can't take the criticism for your words, which are dangerous, really, really dangerous in these days and times, to be spouting this kind of rhetoric, don't say it in the first place. I mean, honestly, so I didn't think we could get a more cruel or Home Secretary than Theresa May, and we have got Cruella.
But you know,
divisive and nasty.
But she's polling well.
Divisive and nasty.
Who is she polling well
divisive
with?
So the people she needs to vote
So
for.
the rump Conservatives, because that is not broad appeal. That doesn't win an election.
Remember that the Conservative Party conference isn't about the message, I think, outside. This is about, and you're absolutely right, this is about her positioning herself within the party And actually, look, you've got to... She has tried to get on top of the migrant crisis. I agree, her language is inflammatory.
How?
Well, for example, with Rwanda, with Bibi Stockholm,
Oh,
with
Rwanda was
Scampton,
a
with
success. Bibi
Wethersfield...
Stockholm was a success, wasn't it?
But remember, the
She
whole point that
spent-
underpins all of this is we need to leave the ECHR.
David, sorry,
No.
you spend that amount of money and waste it, you should be out of a job. Seriously?
No, but actually,
Out of a job.
Tessa makes a really good point because because the Conservative Party conference is not the wider electorate, and this is a problem that Conservative Party has at the moment because the Conservative Party isn't one party anymore; it's two parties. They have drawn in, they've sucked in the people who used to vote UKIP, who used to vote the Brexiteers. Because once Boris got Brexit done.
Which he didn't.
Which he didn't, which is why I put it in inverted commas. They felt that, therefore, job done. All those people would come back into the fold. But actually what they discovered is they have two parties within a party. And Suella is trying to appeal to one side of the party. Meanwhile, the old, One Nation Tories feel completely repulsed by her. And I do wonder if in opposition, which I think we all probably think the Tories will be in after the next election, whether the party will have some sort of split.
What I love best is that she's broadened out her whipping stick. Do you remember originally it was just the tofu-eating, Guardian reading, woke-karate?
Yeah.
I switched newspapers immediately when I heard that she potentially didn't like me. And now she's moved on to the pampered elite, the very rich pampered elite. I think that's smacks really of desperation that she has to go for. I mean, you call them national treasures. I mean, I can't say that I think Gary's... I find him divisive, actually. He's just so pleased with himself. And I'm somebody who's meant to be on the so-called progressive left, and I wouldn't...
But it's funny that she picks on them, and yet she's just come back from Washington. So what kind of pampered elite is she? Well, she's flying around, she's doing this, she's got government...
She's the
places,
hard edge.
But she's a hard edge. So all the stuff that she does off the back of us, the taxpayer, via government, that's not pampered elite. But somebody's actually gone out, actually earned it, actually made a living...
I'm telling
and
you,
been extremely good.
In the Red Wall, they will agree with her. They will see very rich people dictating policy when people, particularly in the Red Wall, want the migrant
David,
issue
that's true, but a
sorted.
lot of those Red Wall seats are lost already.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see who else she is
And also, they
turning
love
off.
their football, and nobody
Well, that's
has
a
to
good
do
point.
what Gary says, girls and boys.
Well,
Why did your party lose the election?
We lost the election because we didn't keep our promises.
On net migration, taxation?
Yes, net migration, illegal migration, taxation, I don't really like this word, but the woke agenda. We didn't deal or reform the long tail of Blairite policies contained in the Human Rights Act, the Equality Act, the European Convention on Human Rights, and we complained about them, but we never actually did anything.
Yes, so you said there's a problem and then didn't offer the solution, and then in came reform with some easy solutions,
Yes.
which will never be tried out because they'll never be in government.
Yes, we didn't build enough homes. We didn't fix our NHS. We had 14 years to get to the structural root causes of the NHS, but we shied away from that challenge. We're too scared of being accused of privatising the NHS. So we just moved the deck chairs around. We, I think, complicated the system a little bit too much. We paralysed it during COVID, and we threw a lot of money at it. You can't...
Zero credit for that.
And yet people still can't see a GP. So despite the record levels of funding for the NHS year after year after year, that's not something you can accuse the Conservative government of failing on. We didn't overhaul or reform the actual system and the way care is provided.
Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, Individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online. Right now, there are attacks happening on a hotel in Rotherham. Marauding gangs intent on law-breaking, or worse. Windows smashed, fire set ablaze, residents and staff in absolute fear. There is no justification, none, for taking this action, and all right-minded people should be condemning this sort of violence. People in this country have a right to be safe, and yet we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice. Our police deserve our support as they tackle any and all violent disorder that flares up. Whatever the apparent cause or motivation, we make no distinction. Crime is crime, and this government will tackle it.
One of the reasons why we've seen the ratcheting up of the temperature about migration is because it's been led by politicians. You might not remember, Brexit happened in 2016. They rode the common tiger of immigration, and we have continued to do it. We've suggested that there's some kind of national threat because of these boats. Before boats, there were lorries, but I don't remember people jumping up and down. It was because Rishi Sunak put it on a billboard.
But why was immigration?
It's one of the 5 national priorities.
In 2016, why was immigration the largest political issue? It was because immigration was running at historic and unprecedented levels. If you're trying to deny that that was the case and that people should be concerned as this as a political issue, then you're trying to deny that the British people are able to see what's going on in front of their eyes. And I think, quite frankly, if you're suggesting this is only rhetoric and you're denying the actual reality of the situation, then you're not only saying the voters are fools, but you're, as I say, creating the climate in which these sort of hideous instances can happen again and again and again. Because these people, rightly or wrongly, don't believe that politicians are listening to them. And if we continue to have a debate which denies their concerns, however right or wrong they are, then these sort of things are going to happen again.
A climate of fear. I heard a right-wing commentator on ITV the other morning suggesting that because of the levels of migration, we didn't have enough school places. Right now, the birth rate has crashed to well beneath replacement levels because of a cost of living crisis. Because actually, that's where the real crisis lies. Forgotten communities who feel overlooked and they pick on the other. Othering, and you will know the historical precedent for othering. And then, our government says, let's dump the most vulnerable, the baddest of the lot into Rwanda, deemed on every national and international level to be unsafe, and yet we consider these people so subhuman, we're going to send them there. And then we're surprised when some of the least able in society start throwing bricks at them. Hey, I wonder who's to blame.
We'll leave it there.
So I've come to Leeds, to the area where the riots all kicked off a couple of weeks ago. It is incredibly impoverished, absolutely filthy. Honestly, I can't believe that people are living like this in modern Britain. Look at the state of these streets. Look at the state of these houses, and there are children roaming around here, often, I'm told, in bare feet. There is glass everywhere, filth everywhere. This, after 14 years of a Conservative government. Look at the state of it. It is an absolute bloody disgrace. It really is.
And instead of saying this is all about the far right and it's nothing to do with anybody else and we're going to provide all of this support for mosques and we're not going to talk about anybody else.
The reason why mosques are having additional security is because mosques are under attack. Catholic churches, for example, aren't having extra security because Catholic churches aren't under attack. If they were, then they should, of course, have it. There should be no attacks on any places of worship. Now, I just find this discussion so completely through the looking glass. Things that we're hearing about the two-tier that I hear from Matt Goodwin and from Nigel Farage and from Tommy Robinson are based on things which are objectively not true. Like Suella Braverman saying that Islamists are in control of our city, or that there have been Islamist hate marches throughout our city, or that peace marches are hate marches.
Things I said alongside Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson were untrue. Well, they weren't true. Well, this actually happened. So the point, James, is people see that, and that's why it's fueling a notion of two-tier policing.
Yeah, but the thing is, if people who have places in the media where they can say them loudly, say that there is a two-tier system based on there not being a two-tier system, then people will think that there is one. And the actual reality is that that policing has racism going the other way. If there is a two-tier, you're far more likely to be stopped and searched. If you're black, you're more likely to die in custody, and so on and so forth.
I do feel that racism in Britain sadly has been re-mainstreamed in a way that we thought was inconceivable in our lifetimes.
When you say mainstream?
Yes.
What does I mean? We're seeing social media posts. Mm-hmm. We're seeing riots in the streets, but that isn't it a small minority of terrible thugs who need to be treated in that way? The question is, when it's mainstream, does mainstream mean that there is racism in the mainstream, or does it mean that in our normal lives we are seeing it more because of social media?
I think that not just we only see it more. It's not just social media though. We see it particularly on the Islamophobic side of things. Or so, as Baroness Vazi pointed out, Islamophobia has passed the dinner party table test to the point where it's mainstreamed. It has become part of the normal discourse. Even when you read normal day-to-day newspapers or so, certain television channels and so on and so forth, you see it there very, very clear that racism is, because this hasn't come from nowhere. What we're seeing right now, I think that I'll narrow this down essentially to a quadruple of evils that we're experiencing that's bred these riots. One, of course, racism. Two, racism, especially Islamophobia. Two, the demonization of immigrants, especially asylum seekers. Three, poverty. And four, inequality. And I think that us as a nation, we have to come to grips. We have to come to finally conclusive grips to the fact that these ills are really breeding a negative, vicious cycle in our society that we have to come to grips with. Blaming it on social media is easy to do, because if we get rid of actual social media, we won't get rid of those ills, and we'll still find ourselves exactly where we are. Immigration has been a blessing unto Britain. It has really done it's made Britain a much richer society. It's made Britain a much more brilliant society. It's made us much more competitive in many different areas. It boosts our economy. It makes if you walk around places like London, many different places, the more diverse the area, so the more lucky you are to potentially live there. And I think but linking immigration to criminality is absolutely atrocious, because there's criminals in every single population you might go into. What we have here now, what the far right is taking advantage of, is when we see a criminal failing within one particular, say, immigrant population, which this young man was born and raised in Britain, they take advantage of that and pathologize that onto entire populations, sometimes on populations that have nothing to do with it whatsoever, such as the Muslim population in this situation. So I think one of the key things we have to become clear about in Britain today, if we want to address this issue, is stop running away from the idea that or run towards the idea that immigration has actually benefited us, as opposed to be viewed as some sort of disadvantage or something that is bad for our society.
Deplore the violence. They're a mindless minority. They're morons.
People
they're terrible people,
joining those
and
riots
they
are
should be
joining
arrested. But what I'm saying is, you cannot ignore the sense of resentment and anger in many communities
From people
where they
who
feel,
aren't rioting.
who are not rioting, who feel
Nels.
that their way of life has changed because of this mass increase in migration.
And that might be wrong, they're feeling. But,
it's what they feel.
But that is our job, is to contextualise this and make it clear to these very people that, no, the person who might have a different colour of skin to you or a different colour passport to you is not inherently inferior to you or inherently a threat to
now,
you.
who is the R that you're talking
We're
about
talking about
there?
us who work in media, those of us who hold positions who hold the power of the state or so. Our job is not to inflame these things, but to contextualise and actually deflame them, to turn around and actually bring some degree of calm and explain to people that don't look at that person in the Holiday Inn who you're about to bomb and make sure they get burnt. Don't look at that person as somebody who's different to you.
Don't look at them as an asylum seeker, look at them as a human being.
There is no them, it's just us, which is the Oxfam slogan. But I must be very, very clear too. Another thing that was brought up was the 14-year-old. One of the things that we're seeing in these riots that really did disturb me was people taking babies along, people taking their children along. There was one particular child, I think he was about 9 years old, who was screaming P words out, alongside her mother. And another lady, who I wish I knew her name because I'll shout out right now, screamed at her and said, "How dare you bring your child along to this?" And you know what it reminded me of? If you go back and look at the old lynching videos from the Deep South, not videos, I beg your pardon, it's not predated video, the old lynching pictures from the Deep South, you would see adults there looking normal, but you'd also see children there. And you think to yourself, you're bringing children to this. And it dawned on me that as much as Glenn Frey from the Eagles put it, so much has happened, but nothing has changed.
I tell you, having fought
in defence of white supremacy as a concept, I think it's fairly concerning what's happening in Britain right now. That in certain places we've gone from zero, almost like modern multicultural Britain in 2024, to apartheid South Africa in an afternoon. For example, in Middlesbrough, we're seeing racial checkpoints. We're seeing people going from door to door, just smashing windows. This is, as Neil Basu, who's the former head of counterterrorism, points out, this is, in many places, actual terrorism. No doubt about it. It's history in real time. Can I just point out a bit, to go a little bit further what Salma pointed out? I completely agree more. We have to address the underlying issues. And I call this ending the drip. Ending the drip. The drip stands DRIP. Drip stands for the demonization of immigrants, racism, inequality, and poverty. The drip. We have to address those four factors, because underlying those four factors those four factors are what are driving these riots, essentially, because it becomes so much easier to view your neighbour, to view somebody who you have so much in common with, as somebody who's actually robbing you, or somebody who's really exploiting you, or somebody who's a threat to you.
Taking what's yours.
When you have those underlying factors there, and so if somebody wakes up in the morning and they're seeing in newspapers or so, or certain television channels, and they're reading hatred and demonization of immigrants day in, day out, it boils up. Same thing as racism, same thing as inequality and poverty. If we can end the drip, the DRIP, the drip, we'll find ourselves in a much better place. That's the only way to end the riots in the long term.
Unbelievable to me that we're seeing people expressing that kind of fear, exposed to that kind of violence here in 2024. I'm sure it's equally distressing to you, but are you surprised by it?
Well, I'm heartbroken by what we've just heard, that people literally live in fear for their lives, and for their children. This is the gross exploitation of an utter tragedy. And for far-right fascists to use this to divide and rule and to scare a nation. That I'm a child of the 70s, and I remember the skinheads rampaging through the streets of Leicester. And I remember as a 10-year-old child being struck by fear when I saw a Muslim, a Sikh man, he had a turban, being knocked to the ground and blood pouring from its head. That stayed with me all these years. And, we should be putting an arm around Southport and the families that have had this tragedy, losing loved ones, many more injured. Instead, we're talking about terrorism on our streets. When you plan an arson with people living above, that is an act of terrorism. And another point I want to make is this: our community strongly feel if this teenager who did these heinous crimes was a white teenager, a race wouldn't be blamed, a religion wouldn't be blamed, asylum seekers wouldn't be blamed. This is exploitation at its worst. And it's time for a nation to say, not in our name. You don't protest.
I mean, I almost don't know how openly to speak here, because on the one hand, I want to be a journalist and I want to offer dispassionate analysis of what's going on. And on the other, I'm a person of color living in this country. And I'm looking at these images where people are quite serious about wanting to burn asylum seekers to death. I'm seeing video of a child holding her mother's hand, dancing down the street in Northern Ireland, chanting, "Packies out, Packies out." I'm seeing video of a black man attacked in the centre of Manchester by a whole gang of white racist thugs. And I'm asking myself the same questions that people of colour up and down the country are asking themselves, which is, how safe are we here? How strong are the bonds of belonging, the consensus around being a multiracial, multicultural society? Will they be strong enough to keep us safe in the long run? And for the first time, I'm saying, I don't know. I don't know. I feel that things could get worse.
What has the last week felt like?
It's felt utterly horrendous. It is a strange feeling, John, when your very sense of belonging is questioned. Look, I'm, as you've said in the introduction, I'm about as Scottish as they come. Born in Scotland, raised in Scotland, educated in Scotland, just welcomed my third child here in Scotland, was a leader of the Scottish Government for just over a year, leader of the Scottish National Party. You cut me open and I'm about as Scottish as you come. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know whether the future for me and my wife and my 3 children is going to be here in Scotland or the United Kingdom, or indeed in Europe and the West, because I have for some time really worried about the rise of Islamophobia. I wrote a column about it actually just about a month ago, the rise of the far right driven by Islamophobia in Europe, UK and the West. And we are now seeing the culmination of, not years actually, decades of anti-migrant, anti-Muslim rhetoric being normalised in the political discourse, now playing out in the most horrendous, violent way possible. And that genuinely makes me question whether or not my family has an existence here in the UK or not. And by the way, I'm not the only one. I've had hundreds of messages from the Muslim community saying the exact same thing.
My dad came to this country in 1969. He loved it here. He raised a family here. But my dad clung on to his Bangladeshi passport until the day he died. He said one day they will send us back. Back then, I used to laugh at him. I thought he was just being paranoid. But now, I'm sad to say, it looks like my dad was right.
Just a quick video to say that actually what's gone on in Britain this past 3 or 4 days has been appalling on every level, especially for the brown and black communities, in particular Muslim communities. What fear they've gone through and the terror being unleashed on brown communities is abhorrent. Now, what I'm sick of, really tired, I'm exhausted, is having to explain racism, is having to explain and defend what we're going through as if we're lying, as if we're making it up. I have an 18-year-old son I've not let outside the house. He was meant to go to Newcastle on the train. I've not let him go because I'm scared he's going to be beaten up or attacked. My daughter's not sleeping because she thinks that at any point we can be killed. I'm not sleeping. I've not slept since this has happened, like a couple of hours here and there, and having panic attacks. Now, I want to genuinely know about these legitimate concerns. I do. Like, you know, let's have a conversation. These legitimate concerns about unchecked males coming into the country, I've got a daughter. I have those same concerns. But about all men, I don't let my daughter go out on her own, not because of unchecked males coming into this country, but just any male. So, and I want to know about, oh, they're in the hotel, they're taxpayers' money paying for the hotels. That's because of the Tory government failing in processing and failing in creating legal routes. Starmer has been in power a month. They're trying to get through the backlog as quickly as they can. So tell me about your legitimate concerns while I sit scared in my house and too scared to let my kids out in case they're beaten up. Tell me. I'm all ears, please.
And what broke my heart, John, yesterday was my daughters being scared for the first time ever because of the colour of their skin and because they're visible Muslims. And I went through that. The National Front, the BNB, the most recent incarnation, the EDL, and we've discussed in the past the sort of stuff I get on social media. But I thought I'd be the last generation who would get that sort of stuff because my kids couldn't be more British, honestly, or English, or Londoners. It's just, where would they go? Do you know what I mean? And the conundrum Hamza has, which my Jewish friends have, which I have, is where would we go, right? I say this though, London is different. I can't speak for Scotland or the rest of the country. London is different to me because there is no other city in the world I'd raise my daughters. I speak to my cousins who live in Pakistan who are ethnic majority and religious minority. I speak to my cousins who live in India who are ethnic majority and religious minority. And they say to me, listen, what you've achieved in London, we couldn't do in Pakistan or India. Going from the council estate I was raised in to be in the mayor of this great city. That's not my brilliance. That's because Londoners have these values. That means they can elect someone like me to be their mayor. So the short answer is no, I'd go nowhere. I'm the first in 3 generations of Khans to go nowhere. My grandparents migrated from India to Pakistan. My parents from Pakistan to London. I'm staying here, mate.